Hey guys, Pete here, HVAC Greatness. So I want to continue on the pricing thing. We're going to talk about departmentalization. But before I do, I need you to understand something. The reason we're focusing on these pricing things is because I'm finding a lot of you're not departmentalized, you're not set up right, you're not charging right, and we want to get this fixed. And what happens is a lot of the people I work with end up realizing they need to charge more, and when they go to try to do it, they can't sell. Guys, if you haven't defined your HVAC greatness yet, you need to get that done. If you can't communicate or articulate why your services are better than your competition's, how do you expect your employees to do that? How do you expect your salespeople to go sell how you're better if you can't even articulate that yourself? Guys, it's not enough to be heating and air conditioning anymore. You need to reverse engineer a strategy that allows your customers to perceive you as what they desire. Okay, so if you're the best, you do the best brazing around and everything else, I appreciate that. Okay, you nitrogen purge or use the newest technologies online. I appreciate that. We all love good, clean work, but your homeowners don't get that. They respond to different things. Figure out what your greatness is, what your greatness potential is, what the market opportunities are, understand your customers and what their values are, and then you can build this huge value so that when you come in with these prices, all of a sudden it's not a big deal because they're not comparing you to everybody else because you're not like everybody else. I hope that makes sense. If you were here on the last one, we talked about your overhead. But now I want to talk about departmentalization and how it pertains to departmentalizing your revenues, your expenses, your labor, as well as your overhead, because that's typically not done separately. So when we're talking about departmentalization, basically it's like this. I've got a CRM or I've got a QuickBooks or something like that. And I ask you, I say, what is your average service ticket amount? If you run that report, what's it going to tell you? Or what is your average change out amount? How many service calls did you do last year? How many service calls do you average each month? How many change outs do you advertise each month? You can't easily find that unless when you entered the data, it was entered in a way that you can run a report and it will tell you that information. So let's bounce over real quick and look at what that might look like with this particular spreadsheet. Now, I've color-coded a bunch of things here just to save time, but okay, so this top line right here, and I'm going to make it, I don't know. I'll make it the teal blue for now. This would represent our sales, right? And this is how most of you are set up. Everything goes into either the sales or it goes into the cost of the sale or your expenses, right? And so when you do it that way, what happens is everything gets mixed in. But if we separate the sales as we enter by department, okay, so if you have a repair ticket that goes into the repair department, if you have a change out ticket, a sale, that money goes into the change out department. It all still falls under sales, so you can run a sales report. But the cool thing is you can run a report just on residential new construction if you did that, right? Or you can run a report just on retrofit, which is your change out department, or your commercial department, or demand service, this green one, that's your repairs. Okay, so what we would do first of all is set these up and decide what your departments are. And so that's what we're referring to here. Let me go into the next one. We actually need to decide what the departments are that you're wanting to have. So most residential companies look like this. They'll have a service department for repairs. They'll have a replacement department for equipment, and they'll have a maintenance department for maintenance. Okay, so that's what we've done here. Now, when we go to buy equipment, what we also need is to departmentalize all of the costs of goods sold, all the stuff that you're spending in that job, and put those in their own categories. Let me show you that. So see how if I'm going to buy some equipment, I don't just go and enter in 4,000. I'm going to enter -20 if that's for -20 residential new construction. But what if I'm getting that equipment for my change out department? That's dash 60. So all we're doing is we're changing the entry. If I'm going over and picking up an evaporator coil for a service repair, I'm going to enter dash 30 because that's the code to enter it. And that's really all it is. Look, we do that for parts. We do that for supplies. We can actually apply our labor that way. And then this way, when you permits, subcontractors, when you do all of this stuff, what happens is you have the ability to run accurate reports. And that's really all it boils down to. How do you know if you're making money or losing money unless you can run the reports? So just set this up with a proper chart of accounts, which is what this is called, in your accounting. Also in your CRM, if you'll break those out and enter those and apply the labor towards those departments, you'll get an accurate picture of what each of your departments are doing. Because a lot of times what you're going to find out is one department is riding on the other department's profitability because it's losing money. And you feel like you're making money, but where are you making it? Where can you improve? Now, if you're a small operation, maybe you have a personal feel, but the bigger you get, the more important these numbers come to your proper management of your company, okay? So let's move on to the next one here, and that is the overhead departmentalization, the departmentalization of the overhead. And so what we want to do is we want to have accurate numbers so when we enter it in our calculator, we know we're applying actual dollars to these different departments. So a lot of companies, most of their overhead will go into the big ticket items like change outs, right? Service calls might look like this, maintenance might look like this, but the bills have to be distributed so that the bills get paid. And so the way we typically do overhead, it's a little different. Let me show you why. Did you notice these dash 20s, dash 40s, dash 50s? That's each department. But as soon as we get down past direct costs and we get into overhead like advertising, these dashes are not applying directly towards the department. This 50 is not a dash. This is not a dash 60. That's not a subcategory. This is the different types of advertising, right? This is the different type of employee related stuff, right? This is all of your accounting different stuff. And so what happens is the overhead is not really departmentalized. How do you know? Okay, so what we did on this tool right here is we just created a manual way for you to do this. So let's take the rent, for example. If you're paying $1,000 a month, we're going to ask yourself, okay, do I have equipment sitting in there? Well, yes, I do. It takes up about half the space. Good. I'm going to put 50% of my overhead on let the installation department pay for half the rent. What about my service department? Yeah, I've got some parts in there, maybe 20%. Okay, that leaves me 70%. Is maintenance doing 30%? Yep, because I got all kind of coil cleaner and everything else in there. And what happens is these dollar amounts get divvied up. Right, I'll go down here. Let's go down and do cell phones. Cell phones are the same thing. My installers, maybe they're on the phone 20% of the time. Service department's on there a lot. Maintenance is on there a good bit. So this actually breaks that down into dollars, and it adds all of the installations portion of the overhead up to an actual figure, all of the service department up to an actual figure, and the maintenance department. So we can actually see them in percentages. If this is 36%, this is 55%, that's 7%. Let's go over to our calculator and let's do that. So if this was, I forget what we said, let's say it's 37%, right? And then this one is 60%, and then this is 60, 90, would be 3%. So whatever that would be, okay? So what it's going to do is it's going to take those and actually convert them to dollars, and then these dollars are actually going to go down into the overhead. It gets divided up by your installers, and you actually come up with an overhead rate. So my point is that if the service department is using all of that, let's let the service department pay for that, and it'll break it down and actually come up with a dollar amount, and the calculator will do everything for you, of course. So don't sweat this if it's kind of overwhelming. But the point is that we kind of have to be accurate on what that looks like, unless we're going to let the market value do that. And let me show you what that looks like. So here, so unless we want to take and say, you know what, I entered in all my pricing, I entered in all my overhead, and when I did a sample calculator and my installs were like really profitable. And then when I ran the sample repair and it was trying to charge way too much for what the market normally charges, I may take some of that overhead from one department and let the other department help out. If you're making a lot of money in change outs, maybe you'll move part of your service overhead over there so that you can be more competitive on the service department and get in that door and build that relationship. And then once the installations come, you can make that sale and you make that money back up. The point is to be accurate on how much overhead you are, and you really should be accurate in applying it to each department, but sometimes you have to get competitive, and it's okay as long as they all get paid. All right, that's the key takeaway. Now, I did want to talk about labor briefly. We've got here, let me show you the image on this. Your labor needs to be burdened. So if you're paying a guy $20 an hour, he may cost you, $30 an hour, right? So when you figure your prices, you got to use the 30, not the 20. That's just what he's getting paid. But he's costing you is more, right? So that's called burden labor. The calculators will take care of that, or you can manually do it if you know how to do that too. Then when you have full-time technicians, it's really easy. We take their burden pay for the whole year and we divide it up by their jobs. Now we know how much to charge per labor, per job, as long as we're selling the same amount of jobs. Okay, that's called a quota. Get your quota and you hit your numbers. Now, if you're a hybrid where part of the time you're doing service and part of the time you're doing installation, that takes a little finesse. I've got the tools built in here to help you out with that. But fundamentally, if we look at what your labor is, I'm going to take two installers here. So I put two installers here, and then so I've got a $50 an hour guy and a $30 an hour guy that makes $80 an hour. By the time I add their benefits in there, I got to come up with $208,000, right, to pay for them. The total hourly amount actually gets paid, and the reason that works is because we divided all of that into the production hours. Production hours are how many hours they're actually installing, right? But the downtime has to be picked up. Now, when you're bouncing back and forth, and you come in and let's say you do something like this, you can come in and say, well, let me show you what that would look like. If I'm only installing, 30% of the time, and I go back and look at my labor, it's trying to cram all of that labor into a handful of jobs, and it's trying to get $3,000 worth of labor on that job. You're not going to do that. You're actually you'd be in a hybrid situation where sometimes you're installing, sometimes you're servicing. So you can do an override like a task pay and come up with, but just be sure to add up all your task pays, both sides, and make sure that they are equal to how much money those two employees are costing you. Not what you're paying them, the burdened amount, what they're actually costing you. And so that requires a little bit of tweaking to get you over that hump. So that goes beyond the scope of this particular video, because that would probably be another 20 minutes of sitting down and actually dissecting and showing examples of that. I don't have anything set up, but the point is that you just use solid math. Okay, come in and figure your field labor for the whole year. Make sure you're dividing it up by your projected revenues so that everybody gets paid. And if you just do like what you're paying for that technician to be there that day, you're not accounting for their downtime, their training, their vacations, all these other inefficiencies, things like that is built that you're going to have to pay for. If it's not built into your pricing, it's going to be paid out of your net profit. Okay, and so that's what we're trying to avoid. We want you to be profitable, and the best way to be profitable and be fair to your customers are be efficient, keep your overhead down, apply your overhead appropriately by department. And then on your labor, make sure you're recouping 100% of your burdened labor so that it doesn't dip into your net profits, okay? So P. Ramsey here, HVAC Greatness. We'll pick this back up and we'll talk a little bit about some of the other areas on proper price calculations. For you guys who have not invested in it yet, I've got a full tool on this, training, everything else. We'll walk you through, we'll set you up, and we'll make sure you're right. it does get a little bit complicated, but don't let it overwhelm you, because it's like anything else. You dig in there and you go through it a couple of times, and the lights start to come on before you know it. You're a master. Okay. B. Ramsey, HVAC Greatness. I'll see you on the next one.